Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stress Free IEP, the show where we help families build their village to raise their neurodivergent children with confidence and support. I'm your host, Frances Schefter, special education attorney, advocate, and fellow parent walking this journey with you. Each week, we shine a light on professionals, resources, and real world strategies that can empower you to navigate the IEP process and beyond. Whether you're tuning in live on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn or listening later on your favorite podcast app, we're so glad you're here. Please feel free to ask any questions if you're watching live or comment in the section if you're watching afterwards. We promise to respond. Let's dive in and meet today's amazing guest. Viktoriya Selden is a neuroinclusive career and accommodation specialist dedicated to empowering individuals with disabilities. She offers a range of services, including career assessment, career exploration, job search support, and virtual job coaching. Committed to treating each person with respect, appreciation, and understanding, Viktoriya helps clients uncover their potential and thrive in their careers. Lately, Viktoriya has been focusing on supporting and advocating for the neurodivergent community. In addition to the individual services, she works with employers and organizations to promote awareness and understanding of neurodiversity in the workplace. Viktoriya, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Very glad to be here.
So, how did you get into this career coaching?
Yeah, so I've been providing career services to individuals with different types of disabilities for 20 years. And it's, I worked for several nonprofits. Over time, I transitioned to private practice. Over the last few years, after learning of my own neurodivergence, I, really committed to focusing on the neurodivergent community and providing the support that they need to help them thrive in the workplace. And so I do that through a variety of ways. For example, contracting with the state VR, vocational rehabilitation agency, through one-on-one coaching, also doing vocational evaluations and career assessments as well.
That's awesome. So for neurodivergent kids, what is like getting out into the career force? Like, what can they do, or what can parents do to help their kids so that they have a better chance of being successful when they head out to the workforce?
Yeah, great question. So work experience is so important for neurodivergent students. And again, work experience while they're still in high school. And that doesn't necessarily have to be paid work experience. That could be an internship, that could be a volunteer experience. It could be even job shadowing several places. It is so important because, I work with many students who really, do not have a good concept of work. They say, when I ask them to explain what work is, right? They know that's something that they will do after high school, or something that they will do after college. But what is work actually? What are they going to be doing? What are the expectations? What are the essential work habits that they need to have? That is something that's a really big unknown to many. So, and I'll talk about, I can talk about, benefits of getting the work experience, and how to prepare for the work experience, how parents can help the students prepare, and then also what parents can do to help their students after the work experience. So it's not just being at the workplace, but it's the work that goes into it before and after. I see many students who get their community service hours by helping teachers in school. And that's great, right? That's still, better than no experience. But being in the school, being with the teachers that they're familiar with, it's not getting them out of that comfort zone. It's not getting them out into the community, being around people that they don't know, in places where they don't know, where the demands and expectations are totally new. So in work experience, again, depending on the individual, could be done on their own, or it could be with a job coach. If somebody is in a post-high school program on a certificate track, they may be working with a job coach, and that's great too, right? They're still gaining the skills and the experience. So I can talk about the benefits of getting the work experience. So first, understanding, again, what work is, right? Having that concept become more real, more concrete. It gives them an opportunity, gives students an opportunity to learn about themselves. So lots of times when I work with high school students and I ask them, what are their interests? They talk about interests that, maybe video games or anime, but, things that they don't know how that would translate into the work setting, right? So getting some experience, it allows them to learn about their interests in the context of work. It also allows them to learn about their skills and abilities in the context of work. That's another area that many students struggle with. When I ask them, what skills do you have? What are your strengths? What are your talents? It's very, very hard for many to identify those. And, maybe some will say, one or two, something very general, like I am creative or I am friendly, but they really struggle to go beyond that. So work experience will allow them to learn that about themselves. Also, it helps to develop all those essential work habits that are necessary no matter what the job is, right? So punctuality and time management, professional communication skills. For many students, they're busy with school, maybe some, after school activities or teams or clubs, but it's based within the school system. So communicating with other adults, with coworkers or supervisors, that's, a totally new concept. Also, it is really great for developing accountability, right? So at school, students get a lot of support, which is great, right?
And accommodations and
exactly, accommodations and reminders and help from parents, help from teachers, which is absolutely great. But the workplace looks very different, right? So if you don't do, your assignment in the timely manner, what happens at work, right? If you're given instructions and you don't understand and you don't ask for help, what happens then? So those are really valuable lessons. And what a better way to learn that when it's, really low stakes, when they're in high school. Of course, I don't wish a negative experience on anybody, right? But if it is a mistake that they make in high school, right? And maybe it ends up kind of worst case scenario costing them their job, right? It's a huge learning lesson. And it's a learning lesson in high school versus, later when they're an adult.
Right. And it's also, I'm thinking along the lines of career, career exploration. Like, everybody knows it's a second, law is a second degree for me. I taught for a while. I'm remembering a friend talking about, and he was a lawyer already, and he was talking about how one semester in of law school, he realized it's not what he wanted to do. However, one semester in of law school, he already had so much debt. How was he going to pay it off if he doesn't finish and become a lawyer, right? So that's an expensive oops, or realization. Whereas if kids have this experience, whether through, I know I'm in Montgomery County, and the Montgomery County Public Schools does the RISE program every
Mhm.
summer, whether they get to do it through RISE or they reach out to other, companies, but like get to actually experience, what does it look like, right? What does it feel like? Because working in a law firm or a medical office or a veterinarian or a retail store, like all of them are such a different feel. What is going to feel right?
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. I think, for neurodivergent individuals, again, kind of translating their interests into work can be really challenging. And sometimes what I see happen is, school is challenging. They want to go to college, family wants them to go to college. So they focus on whatever it is that they're interested in, right? So they can go and get the degree in that. But there's little research and really little exploration, like the actual, experiential learning that happens of what careers are out there. So they end up getting the degrees, just like you said, that for them does not translate into successful employment. And sometimes that could be because the career path that they're interested in requires additional education, and maybe they didn't know that, and they're not ready to continue into graduate school, or because, like you said, all of the parts that go into the job, right, it's not for them.
Right.
Yeah. So by
And it's,
getting Mhm.
I was just going to say, and like, it's interesting because like, I'm assuming you help them also with like, hey, I like anime, and so, well, let's research and look into what careers you can go into that include that. Like, like my daughter, she loves math and she loves drawing. I'm like, architect. She's like, what's that? And so we have, she's only 11 now, but, we have that conversation because it's like, those are her two passions right now. And let's look through, like, there are jobs and careers for absolutely everything that I know, like, I don't even think about, like, oh, I didn't even think about that being a job, I hear other lawyers with me, like, there's a special education lawyer? Like, really? People don't know what's out there. And so I'm just thinking, like, when they're still in high school and still, I like to say, under the protection of mom and dad or guardian, that's the time to go out and explore, because as you said, like, if you get fired, it's not that we want them to get fired, but it's not that big of a deal. Whereas if you're, have a house and a car payment and all that other stuff and you lose your job, then it's what do you do?
Right.
It's kind of a safe place.
Absolutely. And also for individuals who do, let's say, go to college, graduate, and then they, learn that, usually through several unsuccessful work experiences, they learn that, that major, that field is not for them. And oftentimes they end up kind of going back to, entry-level positions, and kind of going through that process of learning and discovering that ideally should have happened in high school.
Right. And if they're lucky enough to get entry level positions, because, like, once you've been in a career, a lot of people for entry level positions, even though you're changing careers, you're overqualified. And that's not what they're looking for. And I know as an employer, like, we're thinking that entry level, if you have experience even in another career, your salary requirements can be a lot higher than a true entry level person.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it does become a barrier. Absolutely. Yeah. Something else that I see sometimes are, students who graduate and they choose to go the work route, so not to pursue education or training. And again, kind of not really thinking about work much, not reflecting on what's a good option for them. They say, okay, entry level work, whatever, it's all kind of the same, so they get into maybe retail or food service, and maybe they have 2 or 3 jobs that are unfortunately are unsuccessful, because the environment is not right for them. And then they find themselves feeling really lost. because
Right.
all through high school, right, their expectation was, I'll graduate and I'll get a job and I'll work. And now all of a sudden that's not working. And really what it is again, the environment is not right. Not that there's no job for them. Of course there's a job for them. Like you said, there's, so many different options. But by not going through that experience and not really exploring, what would be suitable for them, unfortunately, it ends up, being a struggle. For neurodivergent individuals, the right environment is essential.
Right.
A lot of times it's, just as important as the actual work that they're doing. When I talk to high school students and I ask them, what kind of environment do you need or do you want? Many don't know, right? Especially if they have
Right.
not worked. So, usually I'll try to bring them kind of just even starting with the basics, indoors, outdoors, right? Work primarily
Right.
by yourself, work with others. So we start building on that. But understanding all of those nuances for themselves is so critical. And because kind of, generalizing that information, and because, seeing something, let's say in a movie or even on, on YouTube, doesn't always translate into them understanding what that would be like for them, right?
Right.
Having that actual experience is essential.
Yeah. And it's also knowing and experiencing, a lot of our neurodivergent kids, young adults need support in the workplace. And some careers are going to lend more to having the accommodations and things like that. Like maybe it's a schedule, maybe you're really bad with timing and mornings are awful. So maybe you have a flexible schedule, you can find a job. Well, teaching's not going to work for you because you have strict days that you need to be there at this time, so that's maybe not the career you want to go into, but you love children. So let's look at something else that can be a little bit more flexible that might work for you.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And by doing that work in high school, they can go into the right college program or training, whatever it is that they're pursuing, to truly then, help them find that job that is appropriate for them, that is a good match between their skills, their abilities, their interests, and their needs. Yeah.
Okay. And that's, I'm just linking it back to like the IEPs in high school for the kids that do or 504 plans, the kids participating in those meetings to know. I mean, I wouldn't suggest an entire IEP meeting because even adults don't like doing that, but at least for the part of the supplementary aids and the accommodations, like what do you need to support you? Because that gives the child that opportunity to advocate for themselves and to think about it, which will then help them when they go out to get a job of, well, these are the accommodations I might need. Is that possible? And talk to the employer and advocate for themselves.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when I work with students, we talk about self-advocacy. And what I see is that majority of the students, or I would say even most of the students, really do not know about disclosure, accommodations, anything, past high school. And even those who are in college, right? So they may know a little bit about how that part works. But again, in terms of the workplace, they don't know. So having that opportunity to experience that at work, right? And I would say even, let's say, before they actually start a job, if parents can talk to them and discuss this with them, let's talk about disclosure and getting accommodations at work. What does that look like? What are your rights? Students don't know if it's something that they're required to talk about, if they're not required. Also, most of them have not had to advocate for their accommodations, which is great, right? That's what school is for. But they don't know how to do that. They, some of them know the common accommodations they get at school, for example, extended time or, maybe separate room for testing. But they don't really know beyond those common accommodations. Right. So the idea of, one, disclosing, two, asking for accommodations, three, knowing that they have to know what accommodations to request,
Right.
That's all very, very foreign to them. So parents can help with that conversation. Do you plan to disclose during the interview? Do you plan to disclose, in the beginning of your employment? Do you plan to disclose later or maybe never, right? And what are the
Right.
pros and cons of each of those? And the purpose of disclosing, because some students want to disclose, just for the employer to know, right? They
Right.
say, I want to tell the employer that I'm autistic, and if the employer chooses to hire me, great. And if they don't, that's on them. I don't want to work there, right? Great.
Right.
And then some may disclose specifically to get accommodations, right? And the idea that the employer won't know what accommodations to give you is
Right.
really difficult for them to understand. So working with them on, okay, what is it that you may need, right?
Right.
And again, going through the work experience and, thinking about, okay, what would have helped you there? What could have made it easier? It can be really helpful. Yeah, so self-advocacy, accommodations is a big, big part of it.
So what I'm just thinking about the IEP, because the transition sections are so neglected and they're so not done well. And it's so frustrating because, to say we'll look at a 4-year university, well, how is that individualized? How is that different? It's more of, we need to look at, we'll explore different careers, we'll, learn about their own advocacy needs, things like that. So when do you start working? Do you start working with kids in high school, or is it more when they graduate, actually going into the career force?
So I start working with kids in high school. And depending if it's, for example, if it's services that I provide with State VR, like I'm in Maryland, so it's DOORS. That would be through pre-eds, pre-employment transition services, right? Or it could be, private paid clients who are working with me individually. And usually the focus is on the career exploration or a career assessment. Again, with putting all of these pieces together of what is it that is going to make them enjoy the job, also
Yeah.
do well in it, and actually feel comfortable in the workplace.
Right. Because it's not like, my husband says it all the time, and so do I. It's like, find something you love doing and then figure out how to make money doing it. Right? Because if you there are so many careers and so many jobs out there, you shouldn't dread going to work. Yes, of course, obviously, everybody wishes if we were wealthy, 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 and not have to work. But truly, I think about it all the time. I keep joking with my husband, will you win the lottery already? When I win the lottery, I love what I do. I see myself continuing to do it, and maybe not charging, people or whatever, but find something you truly love and turn it into a career. Right?
I like that statement, but I think that's oversimplification of
Right.
really the process that actually happens or should happen. And I think that is kind of the reason why many neurodivergent individuals struggle, because they do have passions and things that they love to do, but how do you actually translate that into work? That's the challenge.
Right.
And in some cases, self-employment is an option, and for some that's really great. It gives them the flexibility that they're looking for. It gives them that environmental, the sensory control that they may need. But self-employment is not suitable
Not.
for everybody, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also, thinking about, if you love animals, okay, so let's look at all of the careers and jobs of animals. Okay, I don't want to go to school to be a veterinarian. I don't, I'm not at that level. That's not where I am. Okay, so let's look into being a vet tech, or let's look into maybe working for the Humane Society and being, somebody there that helps care for the animals. There are so many other jobs that are, I love being around dogs. Okay, let's figure out, that. And I think that's more of it. Not necessarily us all, work for yourself, but in the sense of something that like you look forward to. Like if you love children, okay, let's look at options, working at a daycare maybe, or, volunteering at the school, like those are the things to go out. And as you were saying, let's explore at a younger age,
No.
because just because you love dogs doesn't mean you want to be around dogs all day long in the workplace, right?
Right. Right. No, you're absolutely correct. And even, using the dog example, that's a common response I get. I love dogs. I want to be with dogs. Okay. Are you okay with picking up their poop or cleaning up their throw
Right.
up? Oh, no, 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 no. I don't want to do that. I'm only okay with doing that with my own dog. Okay. That's good that we're exploring that,
Right.
but that's going to be an issue. Or, if you're working around multiple dogs, it's going to be very loud usually. Is that okay? Oh, no, no, no. Like my dog barking is all I can handle. Okay, right? Another thing is, a lot of these, I guess I'll use the dog
Yeah.
example again. The work experiences can be very informal too. So if somebody enjoys dogs and they want to work with them, they can try dog sitting or dog walking in the neighborhood, right?
Right.
Low stakes, but there's still that accountability and time management piece. They're still actually, working with the dog, seeing how it is, right? That can also be done with kids, maybe babysitting somebody in the neighborhood. So getting that work experience and trying things out can be done in so many different ways. And here's what I would recommend is after each work experience to really spend time reflecting on that experience. So not just kind of jump, I'm doing this, I did this, and I did this for a week, and I had this part-time job, but really think about, okay, after each job, what is it that I liked? What is it that I disliked? What did I do well? What was challenging for me? How does that information impact my long-term goals and what I want to do after high school, right?
Right.
Examine the environment that I was in. What did I like? What did I not like? Maybe realizing that having to constantly deal with new customers is not as easy as I thought it would be for me, even though I like to be friendly and socialize, right?
Right.
Maybe being, in one place was way more difficult than I thought it would, it would be. And I really actually want to move around. So really reflecting and doing that, on paper, on the computer, so maybe even creating a chart of where you can fill in things I liked, things I disliked for every job. It could be a handwritten journal. It could be on the computer, it could be even, dictating, whatever way. And after each one, kind of reflecting and looking at what's consistent, right? What's new, right? And then thinking again, how does that reflect the long-term goals?
Right. And I would even say take that a step farther of what type of boss do I want to work for? Because that's all. It kills me with the school systems when it's a clear clash of the kid and the teacher. And they're like, well, the kid's going to have to work with, learn how to work for people they don't like. And I'm like, no, they don't. They'll quit and go find a different job, so that when principals, I mean, I get it why they can't always switch teachers, but like when there's an extreme, switch the teacher, let the kid learn. And that's something that the kids can do after each work, like, do I need a boss that is there checking every step of the way because that works better for me? Or do I need a boss that says, here's the project, let me know if you have questions, and let me be independent and go and do my thing? Because they're two very different bosses, and you can have both of those types of bosses in one career. And knowing that, like, for me, when I go to interview, or before I had my law firm, but like when I would go to interview, like I took it as me interviewing the whoever's interviewing me as well. It's like, do I even want this job? Let me find out questions. And I'll tell you now, as a law firm owner, when people interview for positions with me and they're asking questions about the firm and how I run the firm and things like that, that impresses me, because that tells me they're thinking about that stuff as well, of like, is this a good fit for me? As well as, do they like, because an employer-employee relationship is dual,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely
Mhm.
right. And that also, goes for training. What do you need for training? Some students, after a few experiences, are able to say, I may need, a few extra demonstrations. I do like extra check-ins, but once I get it, don't worry, I can do it. Then you can leave me alone. But those are really important things to, one, know about yourself, and then two, know how to communicate that in a clear way to the employer. And even during an interview to see, how the employer responds. And if the employer hears that, that yes, I may need a bit of extra time to learn, and they hire the person, great, then that's a great match. And then also the work culture is
Yes.
something that's really helpful. So, I mentioned the environment a few times, and, I was thinking more of like the physical environment, the schedule, but the culture too, because the bosses, hopefully not the case, but sometimes they change pretty frequently.
Yep.
But kind of the work culture tends to, be the same. And the work culture will often kind of dictate who, the incoming, person in charge will be. So that's also important to know about yourself. What am I looking for from the culture? Do I want something that's more kind of, structured and more traditional, or something that's, flexible and open-minded? So, yeah.
Yeah. And so I know you mentioned that you work with private pay clients and that you also work with doors.
Mhm.
Can we talk about that a little bit? So people watching and they're like, wow, I think my kid needs coaching. What's the best way? Like, how can people get involved with you?
Yeah, yeah. So, um, if somebody is receiving services from Doors in Maryland, um, they are able to connect with me. They can request me from their Doors counselor for job exploration counseling. And also, I don't think all the offices offer this, but a virtual course called Explore Work. So that's also something that I offer. And then, of course, career assessments, which is actually on the vocational rehabilitation side, not pre-ETS. So career assessments, job exploration counseling, and explore work. And then outside of that, if somebody is, not connected with Doors, because I'm available to provide services, anywhere in the U.S. virtually. Um, they can reach me through LinkedIn, through my website, send me an email saying, we're interested in your services, and we will schedule a free phone consultation to see if it really is a good match.
Great. And then you have a whole list of different services and things you do and different stages of a person's life and career path, right?
Right, right. It's individualized to each person, right? So for younger individuals, it usually is, career exploration, right? And then maybe help with finding a job. So that could be, of course, finding those job listings, which can be really tricky on its own because using even Indeed or other websites, there's so much junk
Overwhelming.
now. Right,
Yeah,
it's overwhelming. There's so many fake posts now. So to be able to go through that, also learning how to network. When students hear that word, it's immediately usually like, oh, you know
don't wanna talk to people, right?
Right. And just, that the idea of kind of, networking is, you have to wear your suit, you have your business cards, but explaining, no, it could be just, hey, reaching out to your friends' parents, right? Or relatives in the area and just letting them know what you're looking for. So breaking it down into like manageable steps that they're able to do without that overwhelm, without the stress. It could be interview prep, right? Especially, the first interview could be very nerve wracking. I think interview stress, interview anxiety doesn't go away for anybody
Right,
ever.
right. No.
Yes. So helping them with whatever they need with finding the job or again, the career exploration, and virtual job coaching, I also offer, which is, I'm not there on site, But the idea is, after a work day, after a week, we can talk about, what's going on. What are your questions? How can you, go about managing that? For some, it's, social, emotional communication skills, right? What do you need for communication? Again, question that many don't think about. Like, what do you mean? What do I need for communication? Right?
Right.
If you need something written down, if you need something more, clear, how do you share that information with your supervisor, with your coworker, in a way that's true to you, and in a way that would be effective and land, well with them. And it could also be things related to executive functioning. I keep getting distracted, or, and of course, disclosure and accommodations. That's also a conversation. If somebody is struggling at work, is it, a helpful way to go about, in terms of disclosing and getting accommodations?
Or is it just not a good fit and we need to go somewhere else? And it could be. And that's important to know also, because I know for some, it's like, well, I should be able to do this. So I have to do this and I have to be
Yeah.
successful. I'm like, no, you don't. There's nothing written that you have to be successful at every single job you do. Right.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. It is okay to say, this is not for me. Right.
Right.
And that could be, again, kind of mismatch of interests, skills, the environment. Absolutely. And one of the things that I see students struggle with sometimes is, again, with entry level jobs, training does not tend to be very thorough.
Right.
A lot of times they'll have somebody who's, like new to the job themselves, who's just kind of barely, figuring things out, training, the student. So training is not very thorough, but the student feels like, well, if this is the training, if this is what I'm getting, then I must be okay with it. And, I must, have to figure it out. In reality, obviously, we know that's not the case. So how do you ask for more help? How do you ask for, more time with training, or, more demonstrations? Or how do you ask for, ability to check in, the first week? A lot of students struggle with that. Again, that initial step after the training phase. And many do end up losing their job, or kind of hanging on, by a thread, and being really stressful because of that.
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I'm thinking about along the lines of like, is it better to quit or is it better to get fired, situation? Because, there's pros and cons to both of those. So if you know a job is not a good fit and you see the writing on the wall of like, the job knows you're not a good fit, like what should you do? Do we quit? Do we have them fire us? Do we go and see if we can salvage it? And what do we want to do? Like, do we want to try and salvage it?
Right.
There's so much. Yeah. I'm
Right.
just thinking about way back when I was in the, working for other people. So before we wrap up, like, is there anything we didn't touch on that you wish people would ask you more often?
I guess I would say not. I won't answer your question exactly, but I'll share a little bit. Not necessarily questions to ask me, but what I would say, if there are parents listening, is to, again, really, really prioritize that work experience. I know that a lot of students, especially, neurodivergent students, for some, school is extremely challenging. And, it's kind of all they can do to get through the day. And by the time winter break rolls around, by the time summer break rolls around, they're just so burned out that they really, really need that time to just do nothing. I really get that. But at the same time, could there be, a week, in, I don't know, 11 weeks of summer, could there be something where they are able to get the work experience in whatever way, right? It does not have to be a formal job, which can be stressful. It could be all these other things that we talked about. And I think with parents preparing their students for that experience. So even, before they start the job, going over like, what would you do scenarios with them? Like I said, what happens if you feel like you're not ready to be alone after the training? If you need more time, what happens if, you're working and all of a sudden you get stuck and you don't know what to do. So going through all of those, and it could be even role playing. But that preparation, I think, is really helpful beforehand. Then providing that almost like job coaching for your kids,
Right.
offsite job coaching as they're working, right? And then doing that reflection afterwards. I think that's a really great piece that parents can do, in addition to their kids actually getting the work experience.
Right. And I'm just thinking parents going, great, another thing on. But that's where you come in. They can hire you to do it, like outsource. As
Yeah.
parents, we learn how to do that so often.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Viktoriya, for coming on the show and sharing all of your wisdom. I love it because it's things that people don't think about, and it really needs to be thought about as parents and earlier in the child's life, right?
Right. And, if you do start early, if you start the conversations in middle school, right? If you start a little bit here and there of experiences in high school, then it is manageable and it's not overwhelming. But just like you said, parents are also super busy. Kids are busy with school, parents are busy. So by breaking it down, I think it's something that's manageable, and keeping in mind that help is available as well.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Viktoriya, for
You're
being on
welcome.
the show.
You're welcome.
And
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Stress Free IEP. We hope today's conversation gave you new tools, insights, or just a little more peace of mind as you support your neurodivergent child. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone in your village. Next week's show, we're going to welcome Janelle McCarthy, who is going to talk about how play therapy and inclusion coaching helps neurodivergent kids thrive. So don't forget to you can sign up to get the email and reminders of the live show. You can register. The link will be in the show notes. And you can always learn more about and connect with me on schefterlaw.com or follow along on social media. Until next time, remember, you do not have to do it all alone.